So this is the team A. I'm Yu Ting. So today's I will talk about the Unit 4 Horizon Report and IST standards. So the first part, I wanted to review the IST standard for educator. There are 4 standards for the educator. The first one is created experience for learner to make positive socially responsible contribution and aspect and facilitate behavior online and build relationship and communicate. And then establish a learning culture. The third one is mentor students in a safe legal and ethical practice with digital tools and protection of intellectual rights and property. The last one is model and promote management of personal data and digital identified and protect student data privacy. So the report I read for Unit 4 is the 2017 MNC Technology Outlook Northeast School. The school is Nordic school is mean Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden schools. So the first one is the trains. There are 3 trains in this part: the short term, mid term, and the long term. And the first one is expansion of digital tests, rise of STEAM learning, and student as a creator. So I will focus on the student as a creator. So in this part, it means in the School of the Future project, 85 Danish elementary school students pilot a digital enriched environment where our regular lessons were replaced with workshop and cross-disciplinary project work involving programming. So this is the example. It means in the Nordic school, a shift is taking place in school as learners are exploring subject matter through the act of creation rather than the consumption of contents. And the midterm, so the blended learning decides coding as a literacy, deciding learning space. So as we discussed before, especially in the blending learning design, it means we need to blend the face-to-face class and the online class for students. And the last one is the long-term advantage cultures of innovation, changing method of assessment, and rethinking how school works. So in my class, which is content-based lessons, we were talking about the methods of assessment. I think in the past, the assessment maybe is the formal like the formal test to for the students to that helps student and the teacher to know how understanding they are for the class. And now, in my opinion, I think we need to change the assessment method. We can use the projects and like games. This method to evaluate the students' the understanding for their content. So about the challenge, Norma, is your part.
Sure. So the challenges listed in the report are, and we read the same report, are listed as you can see there. One of the things that I thought was very interesting was how, considering that these are Nordic schools, how European school systems are in fact very similar to US school systems. Some of the challenges were some of the same challenges that we had discussed before, and how the student needs and the challenges that are issued are very similar. Say, for example, having equitable access to for all students to have access to technology, whether that be wearable technology, whether that be connectivity, whether that be access to learning spaces or blended learning spaces. So some of the same challenges that they had are same challenges that we had. And then considering also there were some differences that were significant to me, such as adaptive and wearable technology. One of the challenges that they have implementing it is in what they focus on. So their student needs are more geared to translating kind of some software or some incorporating artificial intelligence and robotics into making tutors for their students, or in having language translators and having that be a kind of a digital resource for their students. How sometimes we don't really take into consideration those things because we're so maybe more centralized, and even though we're very diverse in our school systems, we kind of just have kind of like one goal, whereas in the global or in the European school systems, they have a little bit of different needs because they have more interaction between countries compared to U.S. schools. So that was just one of my observations. We'll continue on with some of the adoption.
So, like she said, some of the challenges that they experience are similar to what we have in the U.S., but their time for adoption for these things are also pretty similar. For 1 year or less, they have 3D printing, games, maker spaces, and mobile learning, which I would say is pretty comparable to what we have in the U.S. We have several schools who already have that, and I would anticipate within a year to 3 years, almost all of the schools will have that. For 2 to 3 years, they have adaptive learning technologies, artificial intelligence, mixed reality, and robotics, which again, like I said, I think is pretty comparable to our time to adoption for those things in the US. And then 4 to 5 years, speech-to-speech translation, virtual and remote laboratories, virtual assistants, and wearable technology. And when looking at those and then looking at our standards for this unit, they all focus on being a digital citizen and how to make sure that the students are correctly using the technology and are aware that what they put out into the world via technology is kind of permanent and can be seen by not necessarily your intended audience. It can be used by other people. How you got to know what websites are safe and which ones are not, and when you're talking to the right people, like what to say and what not to reveal. Like privacy is a whole different thing in the internet world than it is kind of in the real world. And so trying to teach students these things while also using these technologies can be a huge challenge. I think the 1 year to or less adoption items like 3D printing, games, maker spaces, and mobile learning, maybe digital citizenship isn't as big of a concern for those. But for the other two categories, I think it's a huge concern. Mixed reality, like virtual laboratories, wearable technology, you have to, one, be able to trust that the students are using the technology responsibly and that they're not playing games and stuff when they're supposed to be working, or they're not taking an online assessment and then cheating and Googling the answers. But you also have to hope that when they're being creators, which they're supposed to be, that's one of the trends, that they're being responsible creators and they're communicating with other people appropriately. They're not giving away their information. They're not plagiarizing someone else's information that they found on the web. And so I think the digital citizen part is a huge component in all of these different implementations. You've got to teach the students, but you've got to be aware of it as a teacher, and monitoring that can be really challenging. I know at my school we have something called LAN School, which allows us to see what the students are doing on their tablets. But even that, if you don't have something like that in your district, it can be really, really hard to kind of keep up with what a bunch of different people are doing on their computers. Like for us, it loads slow sometimes, so we miss things. And the students just don't really understand that we have a record of everything that they do on there. And so like they take the tablet home and do inappropriate things, but we can see it at school the next day in their history. So it's kind of making them aware of all of that and just kind of teaching them how to be good digital citizens while using all of these things.
Okay, that's it.